Okay, we are up to chapter 34, page 378, if you're following along inside. Everybody made a bracha? We did a bracha, right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did a bracha, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody having some of those healthy cookies? That's a different bracha. All right.
So you guys want it?
Yeah, may as well. But,
So we have to read it.
sorry?
We have to read it when we make.
Well, if you make the bracha, you need to take a bite. Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't know if they're in.
only for the sake of making the bracha, otherwise we would need it, needless to say. But anyway, let's do it together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei mizanot. We are on page 378, chapter 34. You can be a temple for God. So in chapter 33, last week, we learned to meditate on the joy of our faith in God's non-dual presence. If you don't remember the non-duality and the duality, non-duality meaning that God has no partners, basically. It's just God himself, and there's no secondary gods, God of gods, etc. Faith is experienced only in a certain elevated part of your mind and heart. But it fluctuates with time, because the reality is, we see with anybody, we can say, yes, do you believe in God? Yes, of course I believe in God. Does your faith ever waver? Well, if you're human, the answer is probably yes. Okay, because, depending on how things are going, when they're going fantastic and great, sure, 100%. Not going quite as you planned, you're not 100% sure where God went or what happened to you somewhere in God's plan.
But sometimes you discover God in the foxhole.
Yes, well, you realize that there are no atheists in foxholes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to understand why that's the case, we must first trace the history of elevated consciousness in Judaism, beginning with the patriarchs, leading up to the event at Sinai and beyond. Please help yourself. I'm gonna stick with the coffee right now.
Oh, you don't want too much of that. It stops you sleep.
All right, that'll help.
Yes.
I'll do 2 fists of drinking, one in each hand.
I'll just pour you
I'll wait till Shabbos. No, that's good. I'm good.
a drop.
All right.
I don't like to drink on my own.
Such a difficult congregation, but I have to put up with over here. Well, I know. I've been told before. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay. That was in memory of the Rebbitzin. The Rebbe's wife's yahrzeit was today, the 22nd day of Shvat, which is why all the Rebbitzins, local Rebbitzins, most of them are in New York. We call it the weekend of revenge. The husbands all left about a month and a half ago now. We're making up time. But anyway, so Tanya is celebrating Shabbos with about 3,000 of her closest friends. Yeah. Okay, so he says, this thing is known, as it states in Isaiah, that the patriarchs were genuinely, quote, a chariot to God. Which means basically that throughout all their days, they did not interrupt, even for a moment, their mind and soul connection with the master of the world. At the level of egoless devotion to God's non-dual oneness mentioned above. That's a mouthful, but basically what that means in English is that they never wavered. Bottom line is they always had full faith in Hashem, day in, day out, 24/7. That was the case with our patriarchs. And following the elevated states of mind reached by the patriarchs were all the prophets. They were like the next step down, if you will. Each one reaching an elevated state of mind corresponding to his soul's level of mental capacity. Obviously, who's at the top of all the prophets? Moshe Rabbeinu, Madregas Moshe Rabbeinu, Vasham Yael Kulana. And the level of Moses, Moshe, our teacher of blessed memory, surpasses them all. So that they said to him, the divine presence, the Shekhinah speaks from the throat of Moshe without any filter at all, meaning, unlike the other prophets, there were many more prophets, by the by, just so we're clear, than the ones that you know about, the ones we know about. We know about the ones that have a book named after them, for the most part, maybe a few other ones here and there. But there were thousands and thousands of prophets. The reason we don't know their names necessarily is because their prophecies were not as significant, nearly as significant as the ones that we do know about, and therefore we don't know about them. Minus Moshe Rabbeinu, who was able to speak face to face to God, with God, so to speak. The other prophets, some of them had to be in laying down, basically. Some of them had to be unclothed. Other ones would shake and tremble, tremble tremendously. Each one experienced prophecy on their own level, in their own way, but that was the only way they were able to handle prophesying, I think is the correct word. Okay? Unlike that of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the common experience of the patriarchs, prophets, and Moshe, which makes them all key figures in Judaism, was their heightened state of mind through the awareness of the divine reality. But while the patriarchs experienced this on a purely personal level, Moshe was able to share some of this elevated consciousness with others. In other words, the patriarchs, granted, they were on this elevated conscious level of godliness 24/7. How did that help you and I? We're not Avram, we're not Yitzchak, we're not Yaakov. But on the other hand, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu somehow was able to share this with other people. What does that mean? Standing at Mount Sinai, the Jewish people merited a glimmer of this, of Mosaic prophecy, but there was an inherent problem with sharing a higher state of mind. If you're not ready and prepared for it, you won't be able to cope with it. And that's why at Sinai, the Jewish people couldn't contain the experience. There's a famous story brought down in the Talmud of 4 great sages who entered what's called the garden, so to speak. They entered essentially the Garden of Eden. But it doesn't mean that physically speaking, because there's not like a physical door to get in and out.
Pardes?
I'm sorry?
Is that Pardes?
The Pardes, exactly. So it's called the garden, Pardes meaning a garden. And only one of the 4 went in peace, which was that of Rabbi Akiva, and exited in peace. One of them died out of tremendous spiritual, in a sense, yearning, where his soul left his body and didn't want to come back. Another one lost his mind. It was just too much. The spiritual revelation in the Pardes, quote unquote, was too intense. A third one says became a heretic, and the only one who came in and left, went in and left appropriately, was that of Rabbi Akiva. Point of the matter is, why did I mention this to you? Because you can say, okay, so the Jews experienced a tremendous amount of divine inspiration, right, at Mount Sinai. What happened when God spoke? What happened to the Jewish people who were standing at Mount Sinai when they heard God's, "I am the Lord your God"?
Their souls left.
So it says, yeah, they ran back like 12 miles. I mean, just to get away, it was too intense. Their souls left their bodies. They begged Moshe Rabbeinu to stop. You say it instead of God. But so even though it's true, they were able to experience to some degree what that of Moshe Rabbeinu experiences, but they couldn't handle it. It was beyond them. But the Israelites at Sinai were unable to withstand it, as our sages of the blessed memory, page 380, taught. At every divine utterance, their souls flew away. So this departure of the souls being the complete extinguishing of the individual identity, which was just described in reference to Moshe. So the challenge then was, how do we make a glimmer of the experience of Moshe and other elevated minds and prophets and patriarchs available to the community of the ordinary people? We are not Moshe Rabbeinu. We're not Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc. But on the other hand, I would like to have some sort of great spiritual, experience. How do I tap into something, anything similar to that? L'chein, therefore, miyad amalem lastus mishkan. So therefore, the Jewish people, since the Jewish people were unable to contain this level of revelation within their minds, straight after the event at Sinai, it was too much. So God instructed them, you know what, fine. What I want you to make for me a sanctuary, a tabernacle. And that I'm going to basically live. That's going to be my home. In which, or inside which, there would be the Holy of Holies, for the divine presence to rest. Shihu Giloi Yichudai Yisbarach, namely a revelation of God's non-dual oneness on earth, as will be explained below. So since the people's minds couldn't contain the awareness of God's non-dual presence, a physical structure was made instead to house that revelation. Why? Because the revelation they had beforehand was not housed in a physical object. It was God's voice booming forth. It was too much for them to handle. So at this point, now that there's a physical dwelling place, quote unquote, for God, a mishkan, a tabernacle made out of physical items, which was constantly being erected and dismantled as they traveled throughout the desert, until finally the mishkan eventually made it to Shiloh. Okay, Shiloh's in Hebrew, I guess, whatever it is. Was there for a while, and then subsequently, eventually, we had the temple of Beit HaMikdash, which was built, and that is that lasted. Well, we had 2 different temples. I'm just trying to get this going on this one over here because I'm not sure if I hooked into the right Zoom. I don't know. It's like the different class on a Zoom, and
Wouldn't someone say something if they're like, what is he talking about?
Well,
Who is this guy?
exactly. Strange. What language is that? No, it's like Zoom workplace. It's just you can digest this in the meantime and have some more scotch, sushi, cookies, workplace.
Maybe that might take the risk.
I know, you shouldn't take the phone.
Make up for it with, and
Switch. He doesn't have it. We on. Start a meeting. I guess I'm officially teaching decoding the Talmud right now. Okay, well, as long as that works. All right, we'll keep decoding the Talmud. I don't know, whatever. What?
is there anybody at the other end?
No, but it's recording the class, so.
Yeah.
So since we're decoding the Talmud here on chapter 34, it's to confuse everybody. All right, so back to page 380. So Lachem miyadam alehem lastit mishkan, as I just read. Okay. Now Mishkar Beis Hamikdash ein lakadosh baruch hu elam mishkan lemachne shatu yisparach v'yichudi yisparach shehu el arba amis shel halacha shehu tzen yisparach chmasum v'ashim halach taruch savneinu. Now, so we have various sort of steps that have happened historically. First and foremost, we have the patriarchs. They live in a whole different spiritual plateau. Then we have that of Moshe Rabbeinu, who shared some of his spiritual exposure to God with us by having God utter, "I am the Lord your God," but it was too much for us to handle. So what did God say? No problem. Too much? I'm going to give you a physical place that you're going to build. In it, you have the Holy of Holies. I will dwell in the Holy of Holies. Then we had a couple temples, Beis Hamikdash 1 and 2. They got destroyed. Now what happens? Now how do I connect to God? Okay, if I had a temple to go to and it was a Holy of Holies, even though I couldn't go into the Holy of Holies, I wasn't the high priest, but it was there and he served on my behalf, fine. But it's not there anymore. It's in ruins. What? It's in ruins. And if you only know how to use this room, and I don't know how to use this room, apparently. So the answer is, today we have what's called the 4 cubits of Jewish law, which is halacha. Since the laws or halachas which have been codified for us express God's undiluted will and wisdom. So the destruction of the temple did not result in God's presence being banished from any earthly presence. It's not like, the temples are destroyed and then God's gone. God forbid. Now it's available in the 4 cubits of Jewish law in our sacred texts, which delineates how mitzvahs are to be observed. So while so much has changed throughout the biblical era, the temple era, and the rabbinic era, it has always been possible to embrace the presence of God. In the biblical era, it was achieved through elevated prophetic minds. In the temple era, through the presence of the Shekhinah, the divine presence in the temple. And even in the rabbinic era, God's presence can be found in Jewish law. Rabbinic means starting like from the Mishnah, Talmud, etc. onward. This method has changed, but the core has remained the same. In other words, so the actual godliness is the same godliness. The difference is the process, the methodology to get to that connection has changed over time. So how can you make your mind a temple for God? So let's assume I want to bring God into my life, which I like to do. I like to have a good relationship with God. I want to be happy. I want to make him happy. I want him to make me happy. We have a good symbiotic relationship. So that involves having God in my mind, somehow that I'm thinking about God, not just only when I need him, but like on a regular basis. How do I keep that going? So and that's a struggle, obviously. It's a daily struggle to become aware of God's presence. If something major happens in life, we're usually aware of God's presence in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of the nitty-gritty of the daily grind that we sort of forget at times that, God's got his finger in every single pie. So the Tanya offers us a lesson from history. When the revelation at Sinai couldn't be contained, they built a temple to contain it. So if your mind can't contain the divine, right? You're distracted. It's too much. What do? You make yourself a temple.
That sounds like Hinduism.
They took it from us, and which means. But what does it mean to make yourself a temple? Not a physical temple today. I mean, you just have the shul. But what he's referring to is a personal temple, which is done specifically through studying the 4 cubits of Jewish law, by studying Jewish halacha. That creates, quote unquote, what we call a temple within yourself, a personal temple, within every one of us. Page 381. So therefore, after you've probed with your mind to the best of your ability the above idea of extinguishing your separate identity through awareness of God's non-duality, so when your mind has reached its limit, you can't focus anymore, then you say the following thing in your heart. Because sometimes, we get overly mentally stimulated. It's like too much. You can't handle any more information. You're blocking it all out. Sorry? Feel saturated, exactly. Overstimulated, oversaturated, and you can't handle anymore. It's like too much. So what do you do at that point? It's like, okay, let's assume I want to have this temple to God, and I can only access it by studying the 4 cubits or whatever it may be in halacha, but I'm halacha'd out. You know what I mean? What do I do? Being that my mind and soul root are too inadequate to become a genuine and consistent chariot or tabernacle for God's non-dual oneness. Since my mind can't grasp or understand him in any way at all, with any thought system in the world. Not even a tag end of, meaning not even a tiny bit, of the grasp of the patriarchs or the prophets. This being the case, I shall make myself a chariot for him and a firm place for his resting in a different way that's possible for me through immersion in Torah study, scheduling fixed times for study day and night according to the time available. Meaning, the reality is the vast majority of us are not going to spend all day, every day studying Torah at home or yeshiva or wherever you're going to be. Why? Because most of us have to make a living, so to speak, right? And that involves usually putting in X amount of hours a day into work, and then you got to eat and drink and sit in traffic for at least 4 hours in Los Angeles just to fulfill your daily obligation. So that doesn't leave a lot of time, and sleeping periodically. So no matter how much you struggle to appreciate page 382, to appreciate God's non-dual oneness, you can always make yourself a temple to the divine service or divine presence through the study of sacred texts. In fact, even if you're not a Torah scholar, let's say you're not going to be Mr. Jewish Einstein of Torah halacha, and have limited time and ability to study, this path is still open to you. How's that done? So long as you follow the decree that was issued in the book of Esther, which we'll read shortly, teaching every person in the laws of Torah study that you're supposed to, and in accordance with the teaching of our sages of blessed memory, to study at the very least one chapter in the morning and one chapter in the evening, minimum. A couple minutes in the morning, a couple minutes in the evening. At least you did something. So it mentions the concept of a chapter. It doesn't necessarily, the point of the matter is you spend at least a few minutes studying a little bit in the morning and studying still a little bit in the evening. And this should cheer your heart. You can cause you to rejoice, giving thanks for your lot in life with joy and the gladness of heart. For meriting, when you study a single chapter twice a day, to be a host for the Almighty, according to the limits of your available time, and according to the opportunities lavished upon you by God. In other words, that every one of us in reality can spend some time, if we want to, on a daily basis, to study Torah. A couple of minutes in the morning, like if you come here for chakras in the morning, so after davening, we read a quick halacha, something. It's 30 seconds a minute, but something you did.
This doesn't count.
This counts. This is more than a chapter, though. We're actually doing a whole chapter. It does count. Absolutely does count.
It's not part of Torah.
It
Yes, it
certainly
is.
is part. It's the esoteric part of Torah. Yes.
It's not
Doesn't
the
just mean a
prophets
Mishnah.
of Moses, but
Okay, it's not
part of
just a
Torah.
halacha. Let's give you an example of halacha, because any element of Torah is part of God's Torah, whether it's Mishnah, Talmud, Rambam, Chassidus, or whatever it may be. It's all under the guise of Torah.
Well, in the morning when we do our prayers, there's a blessing for studying the Torah. And then although it's the same thing, it's nothing new every morning, there's some Torah.
There's a Mishnah that you say, exactly.
Yeah.
The reason there's a Mishnah right after that, and one of the reasons for that is that you shouldn't make a blessing in vain.
right away you.
Yes.
The first thing you do after you make that blessing is to read that Mishnah.
Yeah.
So the Mishnah, Elul Dvarim Shein Lam, these are things that don't have a measurement,
Yes.
etc.
There's-
Correct.
There's no
What's
measure.
this 4 cubits? I've not heard of that.
It's figurative. In other words, that you're within, in the confines of halacha. 4 cubits basically is like an area that is sort of your responsibility.
Oh,
Talk
it's
about,
an area, not just a distance.
but it is a distance. A cubit is roughly 18 inches, let's say.
So it has no dimensions.
So 4 cubits would be, for example, 6 feet this way, that way, whatever it may be, around you. That's, in other words, it sort of means like your immediate area. You want to create an environment. That's what the point is. Your aura, your environment around you. Maybe your aura is much bigger, but for me, 4 cubits. Okay, that's basically what it means.
You need a microscope.
So the Dalam Shalach, it means that I live. My atmosphere is within the confines of Jewish law. Okay, I'm not jumping at any one time, usually more than 4 cubits or whatever it may be. Maybe when I was younger, but nowadays, Okay, V'im Yachav Hashem loy oid. And you should make a firm decision now that if God will lavish upon you the time and ability to study Torah in the future, then the clean of hands will increase in strength from Job, and you will study Torah as much as you possibly can. But right now, when you can't study for more than a limited time each day, how do you make yourself a temple for God for the rest of the day? And just anecdotally, I had a conversation with somebody who I met actually the first time when we first moved here. Doesn't matter who it is, but bottom line, he's become religious. Didn't grow up in a religious home 30 years ago. A very driven, highly successful person who has both got a degree in accounting and also his law degree. He's actually going for smicha now to get his ordination. Highly accomplished individual. Make a long story short, and most of his Torah study in particular is self-taught to a large degree. So I hadn't spoken to him in a while. Got married, Baruch Hashem, and he was telling me how we sort of catching up for like 40 minutes. I haven't spoken to him in years. And how his study schedule and how much he works for one of these big firms, basically, which is high. It's like a pressure cooker. Okay, make a long story short, you're busy battling with all the big corporate titans. That's sort of the level of work that he's dealing with, and he simply looks forward to sitting down and studying. For him, it's the joyous moment of peace where I'm not sitting and butting heads with whichever CEO, CFO, whoever it may be. Each one knows better than the next. It was like an oasis. He has a wife. He does. Yeah, they juggle a lot. Okay, but he simply looks forward to this. He told me this is like his oasis. He wished he had more time. And he says his objective when he retires, whenever that's going to be, is be able. He would love to be able to spend his whole day studying in a yeshiva. They have a kollel, it's like a yeshiva environment for for people who are either post marriage, what have you, and he'll live on his retirement pension, what have you. I don't know if he's going to do it, but this is something he would love to do, and there are people that do it. Actually, I have my wife's first cousin works for Deloitte and Touche. You may have heard of, small little company in the accounting world. So he was a partner in Deloitte. They have a mandatory retirement age. I think it was 62, if I'm correct, as a partner. If you're a partner, not an associate. So he aged out, and he did well for himself, Baruch Hashem. And he sits all day long and he studies in Kollel. He lives in Flatbush and he loves it. He has like a structured yeshiva life where he has to be at school, quote unquote, 60, whatever, 5 years old. Sorry? Yeah. No, there's a program. I mean, he's not the only one there. There's other guys doing it too. He lives in Brooklyn, so there's have more of a structure. But this is what he does. Every morning he's got his study partners. It's like, be here, be there, what have you. I mean, he's not getting, he's not getting paid. He doesn't need the money anyway, Baruch Hashem. But this is like the oasis that he liked to get into. So obviously this is on a much smaller level where you're taking a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening, whatever it may be, to step away from the hullabaloo of life and plug in and connect, quote unquote, to that sanctuary that you built within your life, inviting God into your life.
Rabbi, what about a woman if they want to study? Where do we go? Because there's no yeshiva for women, is there? There
are actually yeshivas for women.
Yeah.
Yes, there are. So
Here's the tefillin that
Okay.
Rick lent me, and he has
Is,
tefillin in his, my tefillin in his office.
I don't know. Excuse me for 1 second.
It's a big question.
Yes.
You can have my class.
It's gonna be there, it's gonna be the two.
You can have my class.
They don't let her. Right. I'm sure there's local places to study. Mention a woman. Comes in.
Anyway, to answer your question, yes, there are schools like seminaries they have for women as well. In New York, there's ones in Israel.
Here, Los
But
Angeles.
are they for young unmarried women?
Both? No,
both.
they have ones for married women as well. I mean, well, obviously, generally, most married women, unless the other kids are out of the house already,
Don't have time.
they don't have time to. They're not sitting and going, They have programs for women like that, more so. I don't know if it's like a full day, like all day. I'm not sure. They do have programs similar to that, like it's like for hours a day. I don't know exactly what the schedules are, but they do exist.
Because I know younger women, they just focus on marriage.
Well, I mean,
Is that Hada?
that. Sorry.
Is that Hada or something? I was like looking, and then it's like the schedule is more to prepare them for marriage and so much. Like,
No, but it's not only for preparing. I'm like my daughters went after high school. They went to a seminary. It was like a women's seminary. They went in Israel, but it wasn't just preparing them for marriage. I mean, they had some classes about that, but it was furthering their education, whatever they're studying. I don't know. I mean, they had a whole slew, 20 teachers every day. This subject, that subject, whatever it may be. It's higher level learning post high school, so it'd be the equivalent of college, albeit in a Jewish setting. Kind of college level Jewish Judaica, Jewish studies.
like the older people.
So they have programs. They do.
The retired.
I don't know who you're talking about, older, but anyway, they do have programs for. They do. They don't know if it's a full day, like 8 hours a day, but they certainly have ones.
California, ageism is illegal.
And there you have it. I know there's one in Crown Heights. There's Machal Chana. There's. I'm sure there's more of them in
So-
Israel,
And she's interested for here, where would she go to look for in LA region?
in New York.
She's not retired.
I don't know that they have a program as such in LA. They may. Like in Boston, I remember they started something. I just remember this from my mother, bless her. I forgot what's called, Mishmat or something. It was like a sort of a woman's.
Your wife takes classes.
Okay, good. Take care.
Okay.
My wife takes classes.
She organized, she has classes.
Oh, we
Teaches
have
the
the
classes.
women's
Oh
club.
no, well, she
Yeah.
teaches classes.
Yeah.
I'm saying, but if you
Yeah.
wanted to go like on a more of
Intense.
they had something in Boston, maybe still
What's
do.
the
I don't
thing
know.
on
They
Thursday?
probably have. For all I know, they might have one in LA also. I honestly don't know. I never looked into it. I'm looking to go for my PhD in underwater basket weaving. So we should finish that. And move on to something else.
So the question, my question was who could she contact to find out?
Ask Connie. My wife maybe would know. I don't know.
Oh, there you go.
She's in New York right now, but
Yeah.
next week.
They're ready to get it back.
Right. She says she went to New York. They're probably somewhere in the. I don't really know. Complaining it's cold, whatever. It's all part of the whole guise and whatever. Anyway, okay. Back to what I was saying, page 383, before I got slightly distracted. No, I'm sorry, 382 at the bottom, section 3. So, if Yimyachal Hashem loy oid, azai toidam yesuvayim. So, and you should make a firm decision now that if God will lavish upon you the time and ability to study Torah in the future, then the clean of hands will, will increase in strength. But right now, when you can't study for more than a limited time each day, how do you make yourself a temple for God the rest of the day? So Tanya answers, So, and the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Holy One, and the Blessed Holy One attaches a good thought to the deed. Which means if you decide now that you will study Torah all day, whenever you will have the opportunity in the future, that's enough for God to, quote, attach a good thought of the planned deed now and consider it as if you actually did study all day. So God has his own accounting system. But you're still lacking a tangible expression of your temple because you're just thinking about doing it. You're not doing it yet. So the Tanya now offers the second suggestion. How do you maintain your personal temple status in actual deeds? Let's say I built myself this temple. I started to study every day, whatever, a minute, 2, 5, whatever it might be. But I want to keep it going. I want to add some fuel to the fire. The gam, probably a bad example, but okay. Anyway, the gam shar hayen kula isik b'masa matan yimachnif to shifty yisparach m'zin sazach shit midiyai. And even the rest of the entire day, when you'll be occupied with business, unable to study Torah, you can, quote, be a firm place for his resting for God through giving charity, which is given from your hard-earned income. So, so of all the practical mitzvahs, why does charity render you the closest to a temple for God? There's 613 commandments. Of all the 613, that one is chosen. Why does that make me closer, make me more of a temple for God than, I don't know, choose another mitzvah? Exactly, in the right order, or whatever it is. So since charity is one of the character traits of God, why? Because we say just as God is merciful, just as he is merciful, so you must be merciful and kind. As is stated in the Zohar, chesed, or generosity, is the right hand of God. So he explains, ultimately, it is Torah and not mitzvot that make you a temple for the divine. That's the proper way to do it, as we said above. But if you were to choose one mitzvah at a very close approximation to whatever it may be, since you can't study Torah all day long, it would be charity, because in giving charity, you're emulating one of God's attributes. Even charity, though, is not something you can do in totality. Why? Because you have to keep part of, generally speaking, you should keep part of your income. You can give like 95% of it to Chabad capacity, but at least 5% you should keep for yourself. Now, on a serious note, you go and make a living. So there's a mandated amount of charity that you're supposed to give, which is
10%.
a minimum of 10%. We'll see shortly from our sages that preferably a person should try to give a fifth, which is 20%, which is more than the bottom line legal limit. It's true, but that's the amount that a person should aspire to be able to give. That, which would mean, let's assume you gave a fifth, that you have 80% left for yourself, right, to pay your expenses, whatever it may be. Depends which rabbi you're talking to. And even though you only give 1/5 of your income, page 384, to charity, the preferred amount in Jewish law, as it says, nevertheless, this fifth that you give elevates the other 4 parts with it to God, so that they all become a firm place for his resting place for God. So again, you can't give all your money to charity, because then you become poor, and you're not allowed to do that. Intentionally, you become destitute. But by giving them the tzedakah, whatever, you say it's the 20%, you're elevating all the rest of your money, which basically means you're elevating all the hours you spend every day at work making that money. That becomes, in a sense, that's your sanctuary at that time. You've created a sanctuary by using the money that you make during the day as a means of serving Hashem. One illustration of the logic here is from the well-known statement of our sages of blessed memory, that the mitzvah of charity is equivalent to all the sacrifices in biblical times. As in the case of the sacrifices, which Zohar teaches that one single animal offered as the carbon tameh, the daily offering, caused the entire animal kingdom to be elevated to God. And the entire plant kingdom was elevated through 1/10 of an ephah, was a measurement of fine flour mixed with oil. That was another type of offering. So in other words, even though to us, largely the vast majority of the laws regarding sacrifices are chukim, are statutes. It's super rational. It don't make sense. Like, does God need me to go bring a bullock and 2 doves? And I mean, really? Why? For what? And some of them are never even consumed. Some of them are meant to be burnt completely. Other ones, the Kohanim made part, whatever it may have been. So you're right. They're super rational. They don't make a lot of sense to us, amongst a few other mitzvot. But nonetheless, what is key to remember is that even though it's hard to at times digest and or rationalize some of the, what some people quote unquote call the bloody, sacrificial experiences in the temple. You don't like the whole notion. Nonetheless, it actually, on a spiritual level, that animal that was brought daily, whatever it may have been, elevates. Remember, every animal has a soul. It elevates all of the animals of the animal kingdom. Now, we don't get to see it. We're not privy to this, as is the story with the plant or vegetable kingdom. When you bring the fine flour mixed with the oil, you're elevating all the vegetation by that one act, or whoever brought the sacrifice, whichever priest was bringing the sacrifice at that time. So we're sadly not privy to that. We don't have that peripheral vision. But if you were able to see by doing this one act, if you're elevating basically the whole world around you, would you not do it? Would you not want to do it? You're helping, so to speak, all of the animal kingdom. So it's not a matter of, oh, the poor animal, brutality, the animal should not be killed. Granted, if you're not an animal consumer, not carnivorous, or if you're a vegan, what have you, you can't bear the thought of, killing animals, then that's a personal issue that a person has, a personal, whatever, feeling, if you will. But halacha, Jewish law and Torah stipulates and allows us to consume animals with certain directives. Obviously, you have to be kosher and slaughtered appropriately, painlessly, so on and so forth. Now, whether a person wants to eat them or not, that's your business. But Torah allows it. And therefore, and even the concept with these sacrifices, it's not a matter of, in a sense, of somehow being acting in a torturous way to an animal, which you're not allowed to do. It's one of the 7 Noahide laws is you're not allowed to cause unnecessary harm to an animal. So all these things, as hard as they are for some people to digest, depending what side of the aisle you're on, or you're not sure what aisle, if you're not on an aisle, I don't know, whatever it is. Nonetheless, God, in his infinite wisdom, in a sense, looks at things differently and gives us that opportunity to be able to connect to it however we choose, ultimately. Okay, I shouldn't get too personal about it, should I?
No,
Sure.
Oh, okay, it's just being recorded, and who cares? Yeah, I'll blame it on the scotch and the guy who poured me the scotch. I do remember having once a long discussion with a person who was, I don't know if they were vegan or whatever it was, it was a long time ago, before it became really fashionable. And I said, fine, whatever, you don't have to, you don't want to eat meat, don't eat meat. On Shabbos, you're supposed to eat meat and fish, but if you don't like meat and fish, then don't eat it. You're not supposed to torture yourself to eat it. So this was actually, I don't remember where I had scotch. It was in Alaska. So this is like, I don't know, 38 years ago. Yeah. I don't even remember the person's name anymore. But it was like a whole long discussion about how can we go and eat an animal, and crimes against whatever, the whole spiel. And I remember she was sitting, it was a woman who was wearing a leather belt, incidentally, and sitting on a leather couch. I said, I'm just curious. So I understand eating the animal is terrible. It's a horrible thing that we do, whatever, but you're sitting on a leather couch. Well, that's not the same thing. I said, okay, so how different is that? I'm just curious. Where did that leather just like appear by itself? If you wear leather shoes, they didn't really come from an animal, obviously. They grew as shoes, naturally. And they walk by themselves, It was like an irrational conversation. There was no rationale because it was a feeling, It was like, you can't argue with feelings in reality. And that's what it ended up being. So just kind of jolted something that I remembered. I don't remember what I did yesterday, but that I had to remember. Okay. What did I just say? Good. So I had B'shas HaTfilah, page 385. B'shas HaTorah V'Tfilah El Hashem. I'm sorry, Muvadzer, B'shas HaTorah V'Tfilah El Hashem, K'mashach V'shat V'nem Arba Yodas V'Yas Kufay, which is well Kaman. So besides the first explanation, when you study Torah and pray, you elevate to God everything that you ate, drank, and benefited from for the sake of your body's health, from the remaining 4/5, which were not elevated directly through the 1/5 of your income given to charity, as we explain later on. Meaning that, let's say, for argument's sake, you make, I don't know, $1 million a year, at least. Okay, so you gave $200,000 to charity, 1/5 leaves you with $800,000. Of that $800,000, now you pay for your daily expenses, which include meals and what have you. So you're going to say, okay, so I bought myself a meal, went out to eat. I spent, well, if you're making that much money, you spent $400 for dinner at the restaurant, just yourself, right? Whatever it may be. But ultimately, when you're eating and you're making a bracha, not just like gouging yourself, why are you eating? You're eating to be able to survive, to be able to serve Hashem ultimately. So at that point, you're elevating part of that, whatever monies you spent, if you will, on your food. or on your drink, or on anything else, on your kid's tuition. If you send them to private school, then $1 million is not enough probably a year, you know.
Uncle Sam's $500,000.
Sorry?
Uncle Sam's $500,000.
Who's Uncle Sam? It's always a joke, you know, that in Yiddish they refer to Uncle Sam as Vetter Shmuel, which is Uncle Samuel, okay? But you know, when there's the old saying is that things are always decided in the mikveh, the men's mikveh. They sit and schmooze, you know, it's like sitting in a sauna, what have you, okay? And the world order is being decided there. So when they talk about taxes and whatnot, it's Vetter Shmuel, it's code. I don't know if the booms are bugged, you know. You tell the old joke once of president who's going to come. Well, so say President Carter was coming to town, and he heard about this like mikveh that he, you know, and somehow in the mikveh they always know what's going on before even he does. He doesn't understand how is it possible I have an entire cabinet of people informing whatever's going on around the world at any given time. I can get information like this. How do they know in advance? He can't believe it's actually true. So ultimately, he dresses up like a Hasidic guy, and he comes to the mikveh, and he sits down, and he joins everybody in the mikveh, and he sees they're schmoozing, what have you. He comes in, everybody goes, shh. He's like, why all of a sudden did it get quiet? Everybody stopped talking. So he says, what's the matter? They go, shh, the president's coming. And,
They know everything.
yes, so they talk about Peter Shmuel. Anyway, all right, moving on to section 4. A little too late. Integrating negative and positive emotions. Anybody, you don't have to answer the question. Anybody ever have mixed emotions? I didn't think so. Okay, good. So how do you integrate both negative and positive emotions? Because the reality is that most of us have what some people call mood swings, what you want to call it, negative and emotions, up and down, what have you. How do you integrate the two of them? So a long section of Tanya dealing with emotional maintenance, which began in chapter 26, now draws to a close. In chapters 28 through 6, in English, in chapters 26 through 28, we learn various methods to deal with depression or melancholy arising from both material and spiritual concerns. In chapters 29 through 30, we learn a number of meditations to humble the spirit so as to overcome emotional insensitivity to spirituality, called Timtum Alev. And chapters 31, 33, and 4, we have learned a number of meditations to lead us to joy. Now, the Tanya concludes this section by stressing that the negative and positive emotions we've explored are not mutually exclusive. And it is possible to integrate both into your heart at the same time, both negative and positive simultaneously. How could that work? Now, with all the above detailed meditations that bring joy to the soul, there's nothing to stop you being, quote, disgusting in your eyes and repulsive. Remember, we learned this earlier, a few chapters ago. Brokenhearted and ego deflated at the very same time that you're joyous. So you can be both ego deflated and joyous simultaneously. But because being disgusting in your eyes is a reflection of your body and animal soul. And being joyful is a reflection of your divine soul and the spark of godliness enmeshed in it and energizing it, as mentioned above in chapter 31.
Ego deflated sounds good. It's bitter.
It is. It's exactly what it is. But
here it's kind of in the context of a bad thing.
No.
Broken-hearted and ego deflated.
In terms of negative, but just talking about in terms of a negative feeling. When a person is feeling ego deflated, what it's referring to is you feel like a shmata. Okay, but in reality, when a person, I'll give you an example. When a person, let's say, has a particular trial and tribulation in life, whatever it may be, each person is different. And you know this is not a good thing that you do. It's a bad vice, a bad habit, whatever it is. Okay, but you're thinking, and someone comes and tells you, you shouldn't be doing this. Who are you to tell me what to do? That attitude. That's the ego speaking. Even though they may be right, but who are you to tell me what to do? But on the other hand, now, what happens, say, for argument's sake, and I did my thing. Let's say I'm smoking, okay? And someone comes in, smoking is not good for you. So it causes cancer, and he says, well, everything causes cancer. Living causes cancer, that they say, right? God forbid.
Especially in California.
Especially in California.
Toxic.
So whatever, yeah, don't bother me. I want to smoke. If I want to smoke, I'm going to smoke. I'm not asking your opinion. I'm not smoking in a classroom. I'm smoking whatever it is. I'm in a public place. It's all kosher v'yosher, okay, according to Jewish law and the government law. But on the other hand, it's not good for me. So if someone's checking me, stop. It's not good for you either. So I can say, don't bother me. I need this. This relaxes me. Whatever excuse I come up with in my mind why I need to smoke. But then on the other hand, if I take to heart, quote unquote, I put my ego aside and say, you know, that person's right. It's really not good for me. It's a bad habit. I'm addicted to it, or whatever it may be. It's a bad habit. But I'm able to control myself and not smoke. Okay? So my ego was deflated because I gave in even though I didn't want to. But now that I stopped myself, am I happy? I overcame my vice. So it's almost like having a negative emotion, quote unquote, the ego deflation, what have you. At the same time, the joy of being able to overcome what my ego wanted. All at the same time. So there's there's that element, and then the joy that comes from it. And they're sort of accompany each other. I mean, it could be an example of any other vice that a person has. I just chose that particular one. But so he says, and being joyful is a reflection. I just read that. Okay, since you have two souls, it's possible for you to have two different feelings simultaneously. The Tanya now cites a precedent from the Zohar for this approach. So just to clarify, when a person is feeling egotistical, which soul is it coming from? The animal soul, exactly. Because the godly soul is abject truth, absolute truth. In a world of absolute truth, there's no ego. It doesn't exist. Ego exists where there's falsehood, or you think you commit yourself that you're God's gift to mankind, and you're king of the mountain, king of the hill, king of whatever it is. Ukai Gavna was there, and it was in reference to such a case of experiencing opposite emotions simultaneously that the Zohar states that when Shimon revealed wondrous secrets that explain the destruction of the temple, his son Rabbi Elazar said that he felt tearfulness lodged into my heart on one side as a result of the heightened awareness of the temple's destruction, and joy lodged into my heart on the other side as a result of the revelation of wondrous new Torah insight. So he's having a mixed feeling. This is the famous son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar, who was in his own right a tremendous giant, tremendous scholar. So he was tremendously saddened, needless to say, over the destruction of the temple. But at the same time, he was glad by having this great divine revelation of whatever it may have been. So it is possible to have both feelings simultaneously in a healthy manner. Doesn't mean that you're going to lose your mind. That we can do it on a regular basis. But sure, to sum things up, basically in summation. So because this sort of ends this subject matter to a large degree. Chapter 35 says something else. It's one so if you struggle is worth it. All the struggling we do in life, is it worth the whole? Is it worth it or is it not? That's next week's. But just basically to sum up this particular chapter in particular, in general, is understanding how invariably we're going to listen. We all struggle in life. We go up and down like a yo-yo. You have this feeling, this emotion, that emotion. We want to have happiness. Any sane person wants to feel happy and be happy and feel successful. But at the same time, we struggle. So in order for me to be truly happy, no matter what happens in reality, is I need to know that no matter what happens in this world, what happens to me, somehow or another, I have to come to this conclusion it's for the best. In my own head, if I can believe that everything in my world happens for the best, even though I don't understand it, automatically I'm already a happy person. But who decides what's best and what's not? Hashem. It's not my own, otherwise it's subjective, because one day it's best for me, one day it's not best for me. But Hashem decides ultimately what's best and what's not best. So if I have a firm belief and an anchor, so to speak, that always hold on to, no matter how stormy it is out there, on that given day, I always know that that anchor is going to be there. Knowing that and living that on a daily basis is extremely comforting and probably the healthiest way to live. Because what's destructive in many people's lives is that there is no anchor. It's the flip-flopping all day. You feel like you're a ship at sea. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. And like there's no continuum. most people like and need some form of structure. Some people are more structured, some less structured, but some structure. It's like, you know, we told you when you're raising you're a teenager still? Good, pay attention. Okay. So most teenagers, you know, parents will tell them, no, you can't do A, B, C, or D. But everybody in my class is doing it. All my friends are doing it. I need this. Right? Not you. I mean, you're like an angel. It's other kids, right? Right. But it's true, right? So there's always the argument, you don't understand me, you're archaic, you know, you lived in the dark ages, things have changed, whatever. They throw the whole book at you. So if you were to tell your kid, you know what, do whatever you want, I don't care. Go ahead. Do whatever you want, I don't care. Is that really what they want to hear? So the answer is no. Temporarily, it's like, really? Serious? Yeah, serious. Do whatever you want, I don't care. You can do whatever you want with your life. It's your life. I don't care what you want to ruin your life, go ahead, it's your business. So it sounds enticing for a minute, but then all of a sudden you start thinking, you really don't care? I mean, I'm your kid. Don't you really care a little bit? And then, you know, it's like this emotional ping pong goes on there. Every kid ultimately wants to know that the parent cares about them. They don't always agree with everything that the parent says, and often will disagree with what the parent says because the parents don't understand them, because the parents grew up with dinosaurs and now we're in the modern age, and whatever it may be. But nonetheless, deep down, they do want to be told what to do, even if they don't want to do it. Because if you don't give them rules and regulations, then they don't feel wanted and cared for. That applies as a teenager, as a kid, also applies as an adult. It doesn't change because you get older, by the way. That's the good news. Okay? It is. So, yes, are there more freedoms as you get older? There are more freedoms, needless to say. But at the same time, our freedoms, as much as, yeah, you can do whatever you, well, within the confines of the law, you know, you can do whatever you want. But at the same time, there's a God, there's a Hashem, who gives you a set of rules and regulations. And you're not supposed to do whatever you want. Yes, you do have freedom of choice. Like a teenager has the freedom to say, I'm not going to listen. I'm leaving home. I'm running away from home. You could. It's not well recommended. You know, it gets pretty cold out at night. You know what I'm saying? The streets aren't pretty. They're not. Okay. But it's an option if somebody wants to do it. And there are some that do it. They're usually not very happy afterwards. Okay. So it's the same thing in the sense if you transpose this to an adult, mature adult, if you will, to that of Hashem. Hashem says do A, B, C, or D. And that's never going to change. If you know it's consistent. So if God flip-flops, that's like, it's not like some sort of empirical decision. Whatever, one day it worked, one day, it doesn't change. It hasn't changed in thousands of years. So just to sort of in summation, our job is to figure out how to change, how to fit in, quote unquote, modern day living, contemporary living into Torah, and not the other way around, trying to figure out how to put Torah into modern day living. The Torah doesn't change. Modern day living changes because we have new inventions that come up. I mean, what was cutting edge yesterday is old news today. Okay, but all that has to be figured out how to fit that within a Torah lifestyle, which is doable. But a person has to want to structure themselves accordingly. And when you do, you have that structure, even though we all, waver back and forth internally, but the structure is exactly the same. It's always the same structure. That anchor is always going to be there no matter what happens. When you know that anchor is always going to be there no matter what happens, it is extremely comforting, particularly when you need to hold on to something where it seems like life is running away. It has been said before that at times, if you have a kid, the rebellious kid, I'm leaving home, what have you. I'll put it more so within the religious world context, okay? So you have some kids who decide, families are religious, the kid's not interested in what they rebel against the religion, whatever it may be. They want to be religious, they're leading a secularist lifestyle. It's very hard for their family, for their parents and kids. This is what we grew up with, this is what we value, etc. And it's a struggle. Of course it's a struggle, and it's a tug of war, back and forth. The kid wants to live in the house looking a certain way, doesn't fit into, the model of the house and whatnot, a bad influence. But anybody who's ever dealt with those types of families and whatnot, I don't envy that difficulty, has been told, rightfully so, the kid needs to know that your door is always open, that they can always come back. Okay? So this notion of sitting Shiva, when the kid left the house or to marry or whatever it was, which was sort of a mindset, particularly back in the old country, is not a healthy mindset. It's not. A kid needs to know, yes, they're testing the waters, they're testing their parents, they're testing whatever it is.
Mhm.
But if they want to come back, they can always come back. So the same thing applies with ourselves, and this is learned from God in us. And imagine if God said to us, we said, God, I'm rebelling. God slams the door, you can't come back. We're really in a lot of trouble. Okay. But God's door is always open if we want to come back. And the same thing has to apply to us, the way we treat others.